Right now, as you listen to these words, something extraordinary is happening. Between each syllable, between each breath, between each thought, there exists a space, a pause, a moment of pure potential. Most of us rush past these spaces. We fill them with noise, with distraction, with the endless chatter of a world that has forgotten how to be still. But what if I told you that in these forgotten pauses lies the secret to everything you've been searching for? What if the very thing our culture tells us to avoid, doing nothing, is actually the doorway to doing everything with deeper meaning? Welcome to a journey into silence. Not the silence of emptiness, but the silence that speaks volumes. The silence that teaches, the silence that heals. This is your invitation to remember what you've always known but perhaps forgotten. That sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is nothing at all. Understanding the language of stillness. There's a Japanese word, ma. It doesn't translate easily into English because we don't have a culture that honors what it represents. Ma is the pregnant pause between notes in music, the thoughtful breath between words in conversation, the empty space in a painting that gives the painted elements their power. Ma is not absence, it's presence in its purest form. Think about the last conversation you had. Really think about it. How much of that exchange happened not in the words spoken, but in the spaces between them? The slight hesitation before someone answered a difficult question. The comfortable silence between old friends. The moment when words became unnecessary because understanding had already passed between you like a bridge built of air. We live in a world terrified of these spaces. The moment a conversation pauses for more than 2 seconds, we rush to fill it. We reach for our phones during the commercial break. We turn on music while we cook, podcasts while we walk, videos while we eat. We have created a culture of continuous input, mistaking noise for life and silence for death. But here's what we've forgotten. Silence is not the opposite of sound. Silence is the canvas upon which all meaningful sound is painted. Consider the master musician. She knows that the power of her performance lies not just in the notes she plays, but in the notes she chooses not to play. The pause before the crescendo, the breath between movements, the space that allows each note to ring with its full resonance before the next one arrives. Without ma, music becomes noise. Without pause, conversation becomes babble. Without stillness, movement becomes mere restlessness. I want you to imagine for a moment that you're standing in front of a great cathedral. You step inside, and immediately, something shifts. The noise of the street fades. Your footsteps echo differently. Your voice, when you finally whisper, carries a weight it didn't have outside. What changed? The space itself. The cathedral's vastness creates a natural pause, a built-in invitation to slow down, to listen differently, to speak with more intention. The architecture itself is teaching you about ma. Now imagine if you could carry that cathedral space with you. If you could create that same quality of attention, that same invitation to pause wherever you went. This is the first gift of learning the sacred art of pause. you become a walking sanctuary in a world that has forgotten how to be still. The pause is not passivity. It's the most active thing you can do. When you pause, you're choosing consciousness over reaction, intention over impulse, wisdom over noise. You're creating space for something new to emerge. Think about a time when you were facing a difficult decision. Maybe you were angry at someone, or confused about which path to take, or overwhelmed by too many choices. What happened if you paused? Really paused. Not just delayed action, but created genuine space around the situation. In that pause, something shifted, didn't it? The problem didn't necessarily get solved, but your relationship to it changed. The anger might have softened into understanding. The confusion might have clarified into a next step, even if not the final answer. The overwhelm might have settled into a single, clear priority. This is the intelligence of pause. It's not about finding the perfect answer. It's about creating the space where the perfect answer can find you. In Zen Buddhism, there's a practice called just sitting, shikantatsa. You don't meditate on anything specific. You don't try to achieve any particular state. You simply sit, and in the sitting, allow whatever is present to be present. No forcing, no fixing, no improving. Just being. The first time I encountered this practice, my mind rebelled. What's the point? How is this helping anything? There are emails to answer, problems to solve, goals to achieve. But gradually, something remarkable began to happen. In the space of that purposeless sitting, purposes began to emerge. Not the frantic, anxiety-driven purposes I was used to, but deeper, more authentic intentions. Clarity arose not from thinking harder, but from thinking less. Answers came not from searching, but from creating the space where answers could naturally appear. This is the paradox of pause. When you stop trying to get somewhere, you often discover you're already where you need to be. The great teacher Rumi wrote, "Sell your cleverness and buy bewilderment." In our culture of constant optimization, this sounds like terrible advice. But what if he was pointing to something profound? What if our cleverness, our constant analysis, planning, and strategizing is actually preventing us from accessing a deeper kind of intelligence? When you pause, you're stepping out of the marketplace of cleverness and into the temple of bewilderment. You're trading the illusion of control for the reality of wisdom. Let's try something together right now. As you listen to these words, notice your breathing. Don't change it, just notice it. Feel the pause at the end of each exhale, that moment of stillness before the next breath naturally begins. That pause is always there. Every few seconds, for your entire life, your body creates a natural moment of stillness. Your lungs empty, and for just an instant, there's a space of complete rest before the impulse to breathe in returns. Your body knows about Ma. It's built into your very physiology. The pause between heartbeats, the space between thoughts, the rest between movements. You are already a living example of the sacred art of pause.
But somewhere along the way, we learned to override this natural wisdom. We learned to hold our breath when stressed, to speak without thinking, to move without presence. We learned to fear the pause, to see it as empty time rather than fertile ground. What would change if you began to honor these natural pauses? If you treated each breath cycle as a tiny meditation, each moment between thoughts as an opportunity for presence, each pause in conversation as a chance for deeper listening. The answer is everything. When you align with the natural rhythm of pause and action, you stop fighting life and start dancing with it. You move from exhaustion to energy, from reactivity to responsiveness, from noise to music. There's a story about a master calligrapher who was commissioned to create a piece of extraordinary beauty. He worked for months, producing draft after draft, but nothing satisfied him. Finally, frustrated and exhausted, he threw down his brush and walked away from his work. Hours later, he returned to find that his brush, heavy with ink, had fallen onto the rice paper, creating a single, imperfect mark. But something about that mark, its spontaneity, its natural weight, its unintended beauty, captured exactly what all his careful planning had failed to achieve. He built the entire piece around that one spontaneous mark, and it became his masterpiece. This is what happens when we learn to work with pause instead of against it. We discover that our most authentic creations often emerge not from our effortful doing, but from our willing not doing. From the spaces where we stop trying to control the outcome and allow something larger to move through us. The pause is not a luxury. It's not something we can afford only when we have extra time. The pause is the foundation upon which all meaningful action is built. Without it, we're just busy. With it, we become purposeful. As we move deeper into this exploration of silence, carry this understanding with you. Every pause is a doorway. Every moment of stillness is an invitation. Every time you choose not to fill the space with noise, you're making room for something more beautiful than anything you could have planned. The world will tell you that doing nothing is wasteful, but you're beginning to remember a deeper truth. Doing nothing with full presence is the most productive thing you can do. It's in the pause that life composes its most beautiful music. And you, by learning to pause, become both the instrument and the musician, playing your part in the grand symphony of existence with newfound grace and intention, finding fullness in what isn't there. Look at your hand right now. Hold it up in front of you. What do you see? Most people would say fingers, palm, skin, maybe the lines that palmists claim hold our destiny, but what you're actually seeing is mostly space. The atoms that make up your hand are 99.9% empty space. What you perceive as solid matter is actually a dance of energy and emptiness, presence and absence, being and non-being. This isn't just a physics lesson. It's a metaphor for everything. The most powerful elements in any composition are often the ones that aren't there. The silence between musical notes, the white space around text on a page, the pause between dance movements, the breath between words in a poem. In traditional Chinese painting, there's a principle called shu and shi, emptiness and fullness. The master painter knows that what they don't paint is as important as what they do. A mountain emerges not just from brushstrokes, but from the mist that surrounds it. A bird's flight is captured not just in its form, but in the sky it moves through. The empty space isn't absence, it's potential, it's breathing room. It's the place where imagination and meaning can unfold. Yet we live in a culture that worships fullness, full schedules, full inboxes, full social media feeds, full shopping carts. We've measured success by addition, more money, more followers, more achievements, more stuff. We've become addicted to filling every space, occupying every moment, consuming every available input. But what if the secret to fulfillment isn't filling up, but clearing out? What if abundance isn't about having more, but needing less? What if the path to fulfillment leads through emptiness? There's a famous Taoist story about a master potter who was asked about the most important part of a bowl. Is it the clay, the glaze, the shape of the rim? The student asked. Replied the master, the most important part of the bowl is the empty space inside. Without that emptiness, the bowl cannot hold anything. It is the nothingness that gives the bowl its usefulness. This story points to something profound about the nature of space and function. The value lies not in what is there, but in what isn't. The potential lies not in what fills the space, but in the space itself. Think about your home. What makes a room feel spacious and peaceful? Is it the furniture, the decorations, the stuff? Or is it the open areas, the clear surfaces, the unoccupied corners where your eye can rest and your mind can settle? The Japanese have a word for this, ku. It's often translated as emptiness, but that translation misses the fullness inherent in the concept. Ku is pregnant emptiness, active space, dynamic potential. It's the emptiness that allows everything else to exist and move and breathe. When a room has good ku, it feels alive even when no one is in it. The space itself has presence. It invites you to slow down, to notice, to be rather than to do. But ku isn't just an interior design principle, it's a life principle. What would it mean to cultivate ku in your daily experience? To create empty spaces in your schedule, not as gaps to be filled, but as intentional pauses to be honored. To leave rooms in your mind unoccupied by thoughts, available for whatever wants to arise. I once knew a woman who was struggling with anxiety and overwhelm. Her life was packed full of commitments, relationships, projects, and possessions. Every surface in her home was covered with something. Every moment of her day was scheduled. Every conversation was filled with words. She said to me, "I don't understand. I have everything I thought I wanted, but I feel suffocated. It's like I can't breathe in my own life." Together, we began an experiment in emptiness. She started small, clearing one surface each day and leaving it empty. Not to be more organized, not to make room for something else, but simply to practice the art of unfilled space. The first cleared surface was her bedside table. Just a small wooden rectangle, empty except for a single lamp. But something about that clear space began to change her relationship to her entire bedroom. Her sleep improved. Her morning routine became more peaceful. The space around that table seemed to expand, creating a sense of openness that spread throughout the room. Encouraged, she began to apply the same principle to her schedule. Instead of filling every free moment with activities or entertainment, she left gaps. Intentional emptiness. Time with no agenda, no purpose, no goal. At first, it felt uncomfortable, like I was being lazy or wasting time. But gradually, she realized that those empty moments were when she felt most like herself. Not the self she was trying to become or should become, but the self she actually was. This is the gift of empty spaces. They reveal what's already there. When we stop adding to our experience, we start noticing the richness of what already exists. When we stop trying to improve ourselves, we discover the completeness we already possess. When we stop filling the silence, we hear the music that was always playing. In mindfulness practice, there's a concept called bare attention, observing what is present without adding anything to it. No analysis, no judgment,
no improvement, no story, just pure, empty awareness reflecting whatever arises, like a clear mirror reflects whatever appears in front of it. This bare attention is itself a form of emptiness, not the emptiness of absence, but the emptiness of pure receptivity. Like the bowl, it becomes useful precisely because it contains nothing of its own. When you practice bare attention, something remarkable happens. You begin to notice the incredible richness of ordinary experience. The way light falls across a wall, the sound of your own breathing, the feeling of air touching your skin, the simple miracle of being alive in this moment. All of this was always there, but you couldn't perceive it because your awareness was too full of other things, too full of thoughts about the past, plans for the future, judgments about what should be different. The emptiness of bare attention creates space for reality to reveal itself without your interpretation or improvement. This is why meditation can be so challenging at first. We're used to minds that are constantly occupied, constantly processing, constantly doing something. The emptiness of just sitting and watching the breath can feel boring, pointless, even uncomfortable. But gradually, if you stick with it, something shifts. You begin to appreciate the spaciousness of an unoccupied mind. You start to enjoy the freedom of not having to think about anything in particular. You discover that awareness itself, empty of content, is actually incredibly rich and alive. It's like the difference between a cluttered room and a beautiful, minimal space. The cluttered room might have more stuff, but the minimal space has more life, more possibility, more breathing room for your soul. Consider the great spiritual traditions of the world. Almost all of them, in their own way, point towards some form of emptiness as the path to fullness. The Buddhist concept of shunyata, the emptiness that underlies all phenomena. The Christian mystics' dark night of the soul, the emptying of all concepts and attachments to make space for divine union. The Islamic understanding of fana, the dissolution of the ego to make room for the presence of Allah. Different traditions, different languages, but the same essential wisdom. To find what you're looking for, you might need to stop looking. To become full, you might need to become empty. To discover who you really are, you might need to let go of who you think you should be. This isn't about becoming passive or disengaged. The emptiness we're exploring is alive, dynamic, creative. It's the emptiness of potential, not of absence. It's the space where new possibilities can emerge, where authentic action can arise naturally rather than being forced. Think about creativity. Whether you're writing, painting, composing, or solving problems, where do your best ideas come from? Do they arise from trying harder, thinking more, forcing solutions? Or do they emerge from moments of relaxation, from letting go, from creating space for something unexpected to appear? Most creative people will tell you that their best work comes through them rather than from them. They become empty vessels for something larger to express itself. They create by getting out of their own way, by making space for inspiration to fill. This is the practical magic of emptiness. It allows life to live itself through you more fully. Instead of constantly pushing against reality, you create space for reality to unfold naturally. Instead of forcing outcomes, you allow outcomes to emerge from the spaciousness of your attention. The poet Rainer Maria Rilke wrote, "The only journey is the one within." But what if he had it backwards? What if the only journey is the one that leads beyond the within, into the spaciousness that contains and transcends all journeying? When you cultivate empty spaces in your home, your schedule, your mind, you're not creating absence, you're creating presence. You're making room for life to be more fully itself. You're discovering that the most important things can't be added to your experience. They can only be uncovered by removing what obscures them.
As we continue this journey together, remember, you are not trying to become something more than you are. You're learning to become nothing more than you are. And in that nothingness, that beautiful, pregnant emptiness, lies everything you've been seeking. The wisdom is already there in the space between your thoughts. The peace is already there in the pause between your actions. The love is already there in the emptiness that connects all things. You don't need to fill that space. You need to learn to rest in it, to trust it, to let it teach you what fullness really means. Why being beats doing. There's a lie we tell ourselves every morning when the alarm goes off. We tell ourselves that today's value will be measured by what we accomplish, by how much we produce, how many tasks we complete, how efficiently we move through our to-do lists. We've turned ourselves into human doings instead of human beings. But what if everything you've been taught about productivity is missing the point? What if the race to get more done is actually preventing you from experiencing what's worth doing? What if presence, simple, unproductive presence, is the most powerful force in the universe? Let me tell you about Sarah. She was the most productive person I'd ever met. CEO of a successful company, mother of 3, marathon runner, volunteer at her local food bank. Her calendar was a masterpiece of efficiency, color-coded and optimized down to 15-minute increments. She could pack more meaningful activity into a single day than most people manage in a week. And she was miserable. "I don't understand," she confided during one of our conversations. "I'm achieving everything I set out to achieve. I'm helping people, building something important, staying healthy, being a good mother. But I feel like I'm racing through my own life without actually living it." She paused, and in that pause, something shifted. Yesterday, my daughter asked me to watch her dance. Just a little improvised performance in our living room. I said yes, but while she was dancing, I found myself thinking about my presentation for today's board meeting. When she finished and asked what I thought, I realized I hadn't seen a single moment of her dance. I was present in my body, but absent in my mind. This is the tragedy of productivity culture. We become so focused on doing more that we lose the ability to be fully present for what we're already doing. We treat presence like a luxury we can afford only after all the important work is finished. But the important work is never finished, so presence gets perpetually postponed. We've confused motion with progress, busyness with purpose, quantity with quality. We measure our days by how much we packed into them, rather than how deeply we lived them. But presence operates by completely different rules. Presence isn't measured by output, it's measured by depth. A single moment of full presence can be more transformative than a month of productive activity performed on autopilot. Think about the most meaningful experiences of your life. Were they meaningful because of what you accomplished, or because of how present you were? The conversation that changed your perspective, the sunset that took your breath away,
the moment of connection with someone you love, the insight that shifted everything. These moments have one thing in common. They happened when you were fully here, fully available to what was occurring. They didn't happen because you were efficient or productive. They happened because you were present. Presence isn't passive. It's the most active thing you can do. When you're truly present, you're bringing your full awareness, your complete attention, your entire being to bear on this moment. You're engaging with reality with every fiber of your consciousness. But we've been conditioned to believe that unless we're producing something tangible, we're wasting time. We feel guilty about moments of stillness, suspicious of activities that don't lead to measurable outcomes. We've internalized the machine's definition of value: input and output, cause and effect, effort and result. The human soul doesn't operate like a machine. It operates like a garden. And gardens don't grow through force or efficiency. They grow through presence, attention, and the kind of love that doesn't demand immediate results. When you're present with a garden, you're not trying to make the plants grow faster. You're creating conditions for natural growth to occur. You water when watering is needed. You weed when weeding is called for. But mostly, you simply witness the miracle of life expressing itself at its own perfect pace. This is what presence offers: the ability to create optimal conditions for whatever wants to emerge in your life without forcing specific outcomes. Instead of trying to control results, you become fully available to the process. Instead of manipulating circumstances, you respond to them with wisdom and grace. The Zen tradition has a phrase, "Chop wood, carry water." It refers to the essential activities of daily life, the simple tasks that keep us alive and functioning. But it points to something deeper: the possibility of finding profound meaning in ordinary activities when they're performed with complete presence. Chopping wood with presence isn't just about getting firewood. It's about the weight of the axe, the grain of the wood, the rhythm of the work, the satisfaction of physical effort aligned with natural forces. It's about being fully alive in the simple act of chopping wood. Carrying water with presence isn't just about transportation. It's about the feeling of weight in your arms, the sound of water sloshing, the gratitude for this essential element of life, the meditation of walking with purpose and care. When mundane activities become opportunities for presence, life transforms. You're no longer waiting for special moments to feel alive. Every moment becomes special because you're fully present for it. But presence requires something that productivity culture actively discourages: the willingness to slow down. You can't be present while multitasking. You can't experience depth while racing through your day. You can't connect with the richness of this moment when your mind is already 3 steps ahead. Presence requires what the Vietnamese Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh calls the miracle of mindfulness: the ability to bring your full attention to whatever you're doing, whether it's washing dishes, walking to your car, or having a conversation with your child. This doesn't mean abandoning all productivity or living without goals. It means recognizing that presence is the foundation that makes all meaningful productivity possible. When you're fully present, your actions arise from wisdom rather than compulsion. Your choices reflect your deepest values rather than external pressures. Your work becomes an expression of who you are rather than just what you do. The paradox is this: when you stop trying to be productive and start being present, you often become more genuinely effective. Not more busy, but more impactful. Not more rushed, but more purposeful. I think about master craftspeople throughout history. The violin maker who spends months on a single instrument. The potter who works with clay as if each bowl were a sacred offering. The gardener who tends their plants with the attention others reserve for prayer. These people understand something our productivity-obsessed culture has forgotten. The quality of attention you bring to any activity determines not just the outcome, but the meaning. A violin made with presence doesn't just sound different, it carries the maker's consciousness within its form. A bowl shaped with mindfulness becomes more than a container. It becomes an invitation for presence, for everyone who uses it.
Your life is your masterpiece. Each moment is raw material. The question isn't how quickly you can consume these moments, but how fully you can inhabit them. When you choose presence over productivity, you're making a radical declaration that your worth isn't determined by your output, that your value doesn't depend on your efficiency, that you are enough exactly as you are in this moment without needing to prove anything to anyone. This doesn't mean becoming complacent or passive. True presence is incredibly dynamic. When you're fully here, you respond to life with spontaneity and wisdom. You act when action is called for and rest when rest is needed. You engage wholeheartedly with your responsibilities while remaining unattached to specific outcomes. The great secret is this: presence is always available. You don't have to earn it through productivity. You don't have to qualify for it through achievement. You don't have to wait for the right conditions. Right now, regardless of what you've accomplished today or what remains undone, you can choose presence. You can bring your full attention to these words you're hearing. You can notice the quality of air in your lungs. You can feel the miracle of your heart beating without any effort from you. You can appreciate the countless unseen forces that are supporting your life in this exact moment. This is your power, not the power to control outcomes or maximize efficiency, but the power to be completely here for your own existence. The power to witness the extraordinary miracle of ordinary life. The power to find fulfillment not in what you accomplish, but in the simple fact that you are alive, aware, and able to participate consciously in the grand adventure of being human. As we move forward together, carry this understanding. Every moment offers you a choice between productivity and presence. One will make you busy. The other will make you alive. One will fill your schedule. The other will fill your soul. The world needs your presence more than it needs your productivity. Your family needs your attention more than your achievements. Your own heart needs your willingness to be here more than your ability to get somewhere else. In choosing presence, you're not opting out of life. You're opting into the only life there is. This one, right here, right now, waiting for you to show up fully and discover what it's been trying to teach you all along. Discovering the space where wisdom lives. Right now, as you listen to these words, something extraordinary is happening in your mind. Between each word you're processing, between each thought that arises, there exists a gap, a space, a moment of pure consciousness without content. Most of us never notice these gaps because we're so focused on the thoughts themselves. We identify with the stream of mental activity, mistaking the thinking mind for our true self. But what if you are not your thoughts? What if you are the aware space in which thoughts appear and disappear? This is perhaps the most radical shift in understanding that any human being can make. Recognizing that you are not the thinker of your thoughts, but the awareness
in which thinking occurs. It sounds simple, but it changes everything. Imagine your mind is like the sky. Thoughts are like clouds, sometimes wispy and light, sometimes dark and stormy, sometimes absent altogether. We spend most of our lives completely identified with the clouds, believing that we are the weather patterns passing through our mental sky. But you are not the clouds. You are the sky itself, vast, open, unchanging awareness in which all mental weather comes and goes. The clouds of thought may be beautiful or ugly, peaceful or turbulent, but they never stain the sky. The sky remains pure, spacious, and unaffected whether it's filled with clouds or completely clear. Similarly, your essential nature, the awareness you truly are, remains untouched by whatever thoughts, emotions, or experiences pass through it. This recognition is not just philosophical, it's profoundly practical. When you begin to identify with awareness rather than with thought, you stop being pushed around by every mental breeze that blows through your mind. You develop what the Buddha called equanimity, the ability to remain centered and peaceful regardless of what's happening in your inner or outer experience. But first, you have to notice the silence between thoughts. You have to become aware of awareness itself. This is surprisingly challenging in our thought-obsessed culture. We've been trained to value thinking above all else. We measure intelligence by the speed and complexity of thought. We solve problems by thinking harder, understand concepts by thinking more clearly, and express ourselves by organizing our thoughts into words. Thinking is an incredible tool, but like any tool, it can become a prison if we forget how to put it down. Most people today are trapped in what Eckhart Tolle calls compulsive thinking, the inability to stop the mental chatter even when thinking isn't necessary or helpful. The mind becomes like a radio that's constantly playing, tuned to a station called The Story of Me, an endless broadcast of commentary, analysis, planning, worrying, judging, and remembering. You can't turn it off because you don't realize there's an off switch. You can't find silence because you've forgotten that silence is your natural state. But it is your natural state. Beneath all the mental noise, deeper than all the psychological weather, there exists a profound stillness that is always present. It's the stillness from which all thoughts arise and into which they all eventually dissolve. Learning to rest in this stillness is like discovering a secret room in your own house, a room that's always been there, but somehow you never noticed the door. Let's explore this together right now. As you listen to these words, instead of just following the content of what I'm saying, see if you can also notice the awareness that's listening. Not the thoughts you're having about these words, but the pure attention that's receiving them. Notice that there's something in you that's just aware, without effort, without strain. It's not doing anything except being present for whatever is happening. This awareness doesn't have an opinion about these words. It's not agreeing or disagreeing, liking or disliking. It's simply witnessing with perfect neutrality. This awareness, this conscious presence that you truly are, is the most important discovery you can make. Because when you learn to rest in awareness rather than in thought, you find the peace that surpasses understanding. You discover a happiness that doesn't depend on circumstances. You access a wisdom that doesn't come from the thinking mind. The ancient sages called this awareness many names. In Sanskrit, it's called Sakshi, the witness. In Zen, it's called original mind or Buddha nature. In Christianity, it's the peace of God that surpasses all understanding. In Islam, it's the ruh, the spirit that is closer to you than your own breath.
Imagine you're sitting by a river, watching the water flow by. Occasionally, interesting objects float past. A colorful leaf, a piece of driftwood, maybe even a boat. You notice these objects, but you don't jump into the river to chase after them. You simply watch them appear, move through your field of vision, and disappear around the bend. This is how you relate to thoughts in awareness meditation. They arise in your consciousness like objects floating down a river. Some thoughts are interesting, some are boring, some are pleasant, some are disturbing. But instead of jumping into the stream of thought and getting carried away by the current, you simply rest on the riverbank of awareness, witnessing whatever passes by. At first, this can be incredibly difficult. The habit of engaging with every thought is so strong that you'll find yourself constantly jumping into the river without realizing it. One moment, you're peacefully watching thoughts go by, and the next moment, you're completely caught up in planning tomorrow's meeting or replaying yesterday's conversation. But this is normal. This is part of the practice. Every time you notice that you've been carried away by thought, you simply return to the riverbank of awareness. No judgment, no frustration, no sense of failure. Just a gentle return to the witnessing position. What you're training is not the ability to control thoughts, but the ability to remain unidentified with them. You're learning to distinguish between the content of consciousness and consciousness itself.
Over time, something beautiful begins to happen. The gaps between thoughts become more noticeable. What once felt like an endless stream of mental activity reveals itself to be more like intermittent clouds in a vast sky. You begin to spend more time resting in the spaces between thoughts than caught up in the thoughts themselves. In these spaces, you discover something remarkable. You don't disappear when thinking stops. In fact, you become more present, more alive, more yourself than you ever were when identified with thought. The silence between thoughts isn't empty. It's full of pure being, pure awareness, pure peace. This silence is not the opposite of sound. It's the ground from which all sound arises. It's not the absence of thought. It's the presence that makes thinking possible. It's not a state you achieve, it's the reality you always already are. There's a beautiful Zen koan that illustrates this. What is the sound of one hand clapping? The rational mind tries to solve this puzzle through thinking, but thinking can never arrive at the answer because the answer isn't conceptual. It's the silence that contains all sounds, the awareness that witnesses all thoughts. When you stop trying to figure out the koan and simply rest in not knowing, the answer reveals itself, not as another thought, but as the wordless understanding that dawns in the space beyond thought. This is the wisdom that lives in the silence between thoughts. It's not information that you acquire through learning. It's recognition that emerges through unlearning, through releasing your grip on the thinking process and allowing your natural wisdom to surface. The mystics throughout history have pointed to this same truth. The answers you're seeking can't be found through more thinking. They can only be discovered through the courage to stop thinking long enough for deeper knowing to emerge. But this doesn't mean becoming anti-intellectual or abandoning the thinking mind altogether. Thought is a powerful tool when used consciously. The problems arise when thinking becomes unconscious, compulsive, and identified with as your true self. When you learn to rest in the silence between thoughts, thinking becomes voluntary rather than compulsive. You think when thinking is useful, and you rest in awareness when thinking isn't needed. You use the mind rather than being used by it. Your thoughts become clearer, more creative, more aligned with wisdom because they're arising from silence rather than from mental noise. Like a pond that becomes crystal clear when you stop stirring up the mud at the bottom. Your mind becomes transparent when you stop churning up thoughts unnecessarily. In this clarity, you begin to distinguish between different types of mental activity. Some thoughts are practical and useful, reminders about appointments, solutions to problems, plans for necessary activities. These thoughts serve the flow of daily life and can be engaged with skillfully. Other thoughts are repetitive, anxious, and unhelpful. Endless loops of worry about the future, regret about the past, judgments about yourself and others. These thoughts create suffering without serving any useful purpose. When you're resting in awareness, you can simply let these thoughts pass by without engaging with them, like clouds that drift across the sky without leaving a trace. And then there are the deeper thoughts, the ones that arise from wisdom rather than from the conditioned mind. These thoughts feel different. They don't come from effort or analysis. They emerge spontaneously from the silence, carrying insights that couldn't be reached through rational thinking alone. Learning to distinguish between these different types of mental activity is one of the fruits of awareness practice. You develop what the Buddha called right mindfulness, the ability to witness your thoughts without immediately believing or acting on them. This is incredibly liberating. How much suffering in your life comes from believing thoughts that aren't true? How much anxiety comes from engaging with worried thoughts about futures that may never happen? How much depression comes from identifying with negative thoughts about yourself or your circumstances? When you learn to rest in the silence between thoughts, you gain the freedom to choose which thoughts deserve your attention and which ones can be allowed to pass through your awareness without creating disturbance. But perhaps the greatest gift of discovering the silence between thoughts is the recognition of your true nature. In that silence, you meet yourself as you really are, not as the character in your personal story, but as the aware presence in which all stories appear and disappear.
This aware presence is always peaceful no matter what's happening in your thoughts or circumstances. It's always whole no matter what seems to be broken in your life. It's always free no matter what conditions seem to be limiting you. This is who you really are. This is what you've been searching for through all your seeking and striving. This is the peace you've been trying to find through changing your circumstances, the love you've been trying to earn through your achievements, the fulfillment you've been trying to acquire through your possessions. It was always here, in the silence between thoughts, waiting for you to stop looking elsewhere long enough to notice what was never absent. As we continue this journey together into the deeper dimensions of stillness, remember this: you don't need to become something different to access this silence. You don't need to perfect your meditation practice or achieve some special state of consciousness. You simply need to recognize what's already present, what's always been present, what can never be absent because it's the very ground of your being. The silence between thoughts is not a place you go to. It's the place you never leave. It's not a state you achieve. It's the reality you always already are. The only thing required is the willingness to stop, to pause, to rest in the natural spaciousness of your own awareness. And in that resting, everything you've been seeking finds you. The deep rest that restores everything. We've traveled together through the landscape of silence, exploring its many dimensions and discovering its hidden treasures. We've learned about the sacred art of pause, the wisdom of empty spaces, the power of presence over productivity, and the silence between thoughts where our true nature reveals itself. Now, as our journey draws toward completion, we arrive at perhaps the most important recognition of all, that everything we've discovered has been pointing us back to something we never actually left. We've been seeking what we already are, searching for what we already possess, trying to arrive where we've always been. This is the great paradox of all spiritual seeking. The destination is the starting point,
The goal is the beginning. The treasure is buried in our own backyard. There's an ancient Sufi story about a man who dreams that there's a treasure buried under a bridge in a distant city. He sells everything he owns and travels for months to reach this city. When he arrives at the bridge and begins to dig, the bridge keeper asks him what he's doing. The man explains about his dream and his long journey. The bridge keeper laughs. "Funny you should say that," he replies. "I've been having dreams too, about a treasure buried in the garden behind a house in your city. The dreams are so vivid, I can describe the house perfectly." As the bridge keeper describes the house, the man realizes he's hearing a description of his own home. He travels all the way back, digs in his own garden, and discovers the treasure that was always there. This is the story of every spiritual journey. We travel far and wide, seeking in teachers and teachings, practices and philosophies, experiences and states of consciousness. And eventually, if we're fortunate, we discover that what we were seeking was never absent from the very place we started. You are already whole. You are already free. You are already at peace. Not as a future possibility, but as a present reality. Not as something you might achieve through effort, but as something you can only recognize through relaxation. The word recognition is perfect here. It means to know again, to remember what you already knew but had forgotten. This is what happens when you truly rest in silence. You don't acquire anything new. You recognize what was always already here. But somewhere along the way, we learned to look elsewhere for what was never absent. We learned to seek outside ourselves for what could only be found within. We learned to strive for what we already possessed, to become what we had never ceased to be. This is the beautiful tragedy of human consciousness. We have the capacity to forget our true nature so completely that we spend lifetimes trying to rediscover it. We're like waves frantically searching for the ocean, not realizing they are the ocean, taking the temporary form of a wave. The silence we've been exploring together is not something separate from you. It is you. The awareness that witnesses thoughts is not something you possess, it's what you are. The peace that exists in the pause between breaths is not a state you enter, it's the ground of your being. When you truly understand this, not intellectually, but with your whole being, the search ends. Not because you found what you were looking for, but because you've realized you were never actually lost. This recognition brings what the mystics call the peace that passeth understanding. It's not the peace of having everything go your way. It's not the peace of solving all your problems or achieving all your goals. It's the peace of recognizing that your deepest nature is already, always, inherently peaceful, regardless of what's happening on the surface of life.
This peace doesn't depend on circumstances because it's not created by circumstances. It doesn't come and go because it's not a temporary state. It's the unchanging background against which all change occurs, the still point around which your entire life revolves. When you rest in this recognition, something profound shifts in how you relate to everything else in your experience. Problems don't disappear, but your relationship to problems transforms. Challenges don't vanish, but you meet them from a place of fundamental okayness rather than fundamental anxiety. You stop trying to fix yourself because you realize you were never broken. You stop trying to improve yourself because you recognize your essential perfection. You stop trying to find yourself because you understand you were never lost. This doesn't mean becoming complacent or passive. On the contrary, when you stop seeking yourself in external achievements and acquisitions, when you stop trying to earn your worth through performance, you're free to engage with life from joy rather than from need, from love rather than from fear.
from wholeness rather than from lack. Your actions become an expression of your nature rather than an attempt to change it. Your relationships become a celebration of connection rather than a search for completion. Your work becomes a gift you offer to the world rather than a strategy for survival or significance. You realize that you've been asking the wrong questions. Instead of, how can I find peace? You begin to ask, how can I stop disturbing the peace that's already here? Instead of, how can I become happy? You ask, how can I stop creating unnecessary suffering? Instead of, how can I find my purpose? You ask, how can I align with the purpose that's already expressing itself through me? This shift from seeking to recognizing, from acquiring to uncovering, from becoming to being, is perhaps the most important transition any human being can make. It's the difference between living your life as a problem to be solved and living it as a mystery to be enjoyed. The great teacher Nisargadatta Maharaj once said, "You are not what you take yourself to be. Find out what you are. Watch the sense, I am, without any addition. Stay with it, be with it, love it, and you are free." This is the ultimate invitation of silence, to discover who you are when you're not trying to be anyone, to recognize what remains when all the stories fall away, to rest in the I am before it gets modified by any description. In this resting, you discover that you are not a separate self struggling to survive in a hostile universe. You are the universe itself, temporarily appearing as a separate self, playing at the game of forgetting and remembering its own nature. You are not a wave trying to find the ocean. You are the ocean, dreaming it's a wave, slowly awakening to remember what it has always been. This awakening doesn't happen once and then remain static. It's a continuous recognition, a moment-by-moment choice to rest in truth rather than in the stories that obscure truth. Every time you pause, every time you create empty space, every time you choose presence over productivity, you're returning to the source of your being. And from this source, life becomes infinitely richer, not because you're adding anything to your experience, but because you are no longer subtracting from it through resistance, judgment, and the endless seeking for something better. You begin to see that every moment is already perfect, not because it matches your preferences, but because it's an exact expression of the infinite creativity of existence. Every experience becomes sacred, not because it's pleasant, but because it's consciousness knowing itself through form.
Every person you meet becomes a mirror, reflecting back to you the same awareness that you are. Every situation becomes a teacher, offering you opportunities to practice recognizing your true nature under all conditions. This is what it means to return to the source. It's not a geographical journey or even a psychological process. It's a simple relaxation back into what you've never actually departed from. It's like the prodigal son suddenly realizing he never left home. He just forgot where he was. The silence that speaks, the emptiness that's full, the nothingness that contains everything. These are not poetic metaphors. They are direct descriptions of your own essential nature when all the additions and modifications are seen through. You are the silence in which all sounds arise and dissolve. You are the space in which all experiences appear and disappear. You are the awareness in which the entire movie of your life plays out, remaining forever unchanged by any scene that appears on the screen. This is who you really are. This is what you've always been. This is what you can never not be, no matter how convincingly you may seem to forget it.
The journey into silence has led us back to where we started, but now we see it with new eyes. We recognize the treasure that was always in our possession. We remember the peace that was never absent. We rest in the love that we are. And from this resting, this deep remembering, this return to source, everything becomes possible. Not because you've gained new powers or abilities, but because you've stopped limiting yourself with false beliefs about what you are. You don't need to maintain this recognition through effort. You only need to relax into it, trust it, allow it to be what it has always been, the unchanging truth of your being, the permanent foundation beneath all the temporary constructions of personality and circumstance. Welcome home. You never left, but welcome to the recognition of what was always already here, always already now, always already you. As our time together draws to a close, I want you to notice something. Right now, in this very moment, you are exactly where you need to be. The silence we've explored together isn't something you need to achieve or maintain or perfect. It's what you are when you stop trying to be anything else. You came to this listening seeking something, perhaps peace, perhaps understanding, perhaps just a moment of refuge from the noise of daily life. What I hope you've discovered is that you already possess everything you were seeking. It was never hidden from you. It was only obscured by the belief that it was somewhere else, some other time, some other version of yourself. The power of doing nothing isn't really about doing nothing. It's about being everything, being fully, completely, unapologetically present for the miracle of your own existence. It's about remembering that you are not a problem to be solved, but a mystery to be lived. In a world that profits from your dissatisfaction, choosing contentment is revolutionary. In a culture that demands constant improvement, accepting yourself as you are is radical. In a society addicted to noise, embracing silence is an act of rebellion. You don't need to become different to access the peace you're seeking. You don't need to fix anything about yourself to deserve the love that's your birthright. You don't need to earn your worth through achievement or prove your value through productivity. You are enough. Right here, right now, exactly as you are enough. The silence that speaks is speaking through you in this very moment. The wisdom of empty spaces is expressing itself as the spaciousness of your awareness. The power of presence is manifesting as your ability to be here, now, listening to these words with your whole being. Take this with you as you return to your daily life. Every pause is a prayer, every breath is a meditation, every moment of stillness is a return to the source of everything meaningful. You don't need special conditions or perfect circumstances. You carry the sanctuary within you wherever you go. When the world gets loud, remember the silence. When life gets complicated, remember the simplicity. When you forget who you really are, remember this moment, this recognition, this peace, this coming home to yourself. Subscribe to the Quiet Mind not just as a channel, but as a way of being. Return to this space not just as a video, but as a state of consciousness. Carry this silence with you not as a memory, but as a living reality. You are the Quiet Mind. You always have been, you always will be. The silence speaks, and you are both the speaker and the listener, the teacher and the student, the seeker and the sought. Welcome to the rest of your life lived from this deep, abiding knowing. Welcome home.